and Republican walk into the bar is live now, and I'm like, wait, what? We are?
We're live right now, but yeah, sometimes the technology gets a little confusing.
Yeah. So yeah, now we're live. We were just talking right before we just got on live right now about how there was a time where she was streaming The Juice,
Right.
but it had a Democrat and Republican walk into a bar banner, and I get notifications whenever we come live. And I was like, wait, we're live? And it's like 8 a.m, and I'm like, just kidding.
I clicked the wrong button when I went into the streaming service. So
yeah, technology can be iffy, and it might be iffy today, by the way. We do have a little microphone problem. So if you don't hear me again, it is again a conspiracy from Cindy. She's trying to silence.
That's right. Yeah. Or, no, it's just that this new computer that I got for work is fantastic. However, it uses this now universal USB-C plug for everything. However, if you want to plug in anything with a regular USB or whatever, you have to have an adapter. And I forgot the adapter because my kids and I were playing video games last night on the TV, and we needed the HDMI. So
that's fine. The TV games are super fun, right? We do that with our family too. We do that Jackbox games. Yes.
Yes.
I even grew up before it was Jackbox with the you don't know Jack CDs.
Yeah.
And so that's what I got really hooked on. That's just all nostalgia. But we usually play I forgot what it's called, but it's the one word Quiplash. Yes. The one we really play. It's super fun.
Yep, Quiplash. Fibbage is good too, where you have to make up a lie. It's like you have to pick.
My sister always wants to do the picture one, and I hate those because I can't draw.
My kids love playing the picture ones.
I can't do
because they're little, so they can all draw. We did an old one called Civic Doodle. Where you're pretending to make like a public art.
Oh God!
And it's really fun. It's a goofy game, but it's a great thing. You play with like your own devices on the computer.
Yeah, on the computer, on the phone. So that's super fun. Definitely a cool family thing that gets to be done. And also this yesterday was Rosh Hashanah and everything. Right. So for all our Lashana Tova, you're right. I should know this. I was raised Jewish, and actually I was at a Tashlit service today with Rabbi Bruce Diamond, who's the rabbi who's been a major part of my life down here in Lee County, a very good friend of mine. And so we did the Tashlit services, which when you cast your bread in the water and it symbolizes your sins, and it's a wonderful service. And I did get to hear the shofar yesterday, though I was working, so I couldn't go to the Rosh Hashanah service.
Fantastic. Well, Happy New Year to
Happy New Year.
Great. Wishing you sweetness, right?
Yeah, sweet New Year. It's always a sweet New Year with the apples and honey, which I didn't get to do, which now I'm feeling bad about but I am getting some sweetness coming up my way with this beautiful brownie sundae.
Oh my goodness.
So there's my sweet New Year right there. It's been like 4 weeks that I've been waiting for it to happen.
And I didn't bring my kids, so he's got one today.
Each time we only had enough for either me or the children, and unfortunately children take precedent when it comes to Sundays.
So that's good. So this is our weekly broadcast. So Democrat and Republican walk into a bar, brought to you by Big Mouth Media, and I am your Democrat, Dr. Cindy Banyai.
And I'm, of course, your Republican, Sean Hartman.
So let's different stuff going on. We're after Labor Day here, so campaigns are kicking up into full gear.
Well, official start of campaign season. I actually saw Vivek Ramaswamy was on one of the talk shows, and then Donald Trump actually was on Meet the Press so Meet the Press, for those who don't follow, they recently switched hosts. Chuck Todd has retired, and Christine Welker is the new host. So all 5 of the Sunday talk shows are not either hosted or co-hosted by women. So it's a historic moment. But for her first interview and for her first major show, it was 30 minutes of President Trump, which was quite interesting. It was very fascinating. He was very defiant on a lot of things. I think the most notable thing, though, was how he approached abortion. He is definitely not taking a strong pro-life stance. He's being very wishy-washy, and it's clear to me that he's like definitely looking at the polling behind it and everything, but he's like saying we need to find a number that we can compromise on for an abortion ban. But the problem is he's very fluid. He doesn't really have anything. He's not standing on a position on the abortion issue. And I don't know if the pro-life people are going to be super happy about that. So, very interesting interview. Very, very interesting way to start your Meet the Press career from Christine Welker is to start with the Donald Trump interview. But, go big or go home.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, campaign season is of course in full swing. But we were talking, one of the things that's been going on is all these labor stuff. We ended the show a few weeks ago where I was talking about how labor and labor unions are important to free markets, and we're seeing, I think now with the United Auto Workers, and I think you have a little bit more information than I do because I'm just catching this today or yesterday. I didn't even realize they were on strike until yesterday. And then they're now coming back to the table and having a discussion with the automotive industry. But definitely let's talk about. I wanted to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. So what we see is the UAW, the United Auto Workers, are striking against all three of the big three automakers. That's Ford, GM, and why do I know that? I'm from Detroit.
Ford, GM,
Chrysler.
Right? No, Chrysler, GM.
It's Chrysler, Fiat. So, and now Daimler. Anyway, it's a whole big mess. So they decided to Thursday night, there was a deadline at midnight to come up with an agreement with the auto workers, and that lapsed. And so they began a strike. They started striking against a few specific plants, trying to, inflict some economic pain on the companies.
Well, not like disrupting everything, like the entire supply chain and bringing the economy to the halt. So it's very strategic in how they're doing it. And of course, now they're being brought back to the table. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. That was basically it. Okay.
That was it. I mean, some of the issues, of course, are the parental issues of pay. And what the auto UAW president was really talking about was that, in the downturn for manufacturing in the United States, which was the early part of the 2000s, especially after the recession, 2009, 2010, they conceded a lot. And the companies, GM itself went bankrupt and they had to give up their pensions. And so the unions themselves feel like they've given up so much. And then these companies that have come back from the brink of collapse, and the executives and the shareholders are making money, but the wages for the workers have really stagnated. So that's what they are asking for is more pay to make up what they had given up.
Yeah, which is obviously fair, especially if when the downturn happened, they voluntarily gave up those benefits as opposed to what usually happens, which is the corporation decides to take it away anyway, and then there's a fight between the business and the labor. I mean, that's what's happened even historically. So many of these early labor movements and labor fights in the early 19th, late 19th, early 20th century were all about, the company taking away something and then the labor movement fighting back. And so the fact that they were willing to even do that is applaudable. And the fact that that they aren't being rewarded for that is ridiculous. Again, we're getting it, especially within the Republican Party, at least rhetorically, we're starting to become a more pro-worker party. The problem is how does that show itself in policy? And
that's what everybody wants to know.
Exactly. How does that show up in policy? And
it showed up in rhetoric.
It showed up,
not showed up in policy.
Which again, we have to start rethinking how we approach policy now too, because we have to be pro-worker. I think it's very important to be pro-worker, especially with these auto workers who are out there doing a lot of difficult work, basically in one of the main manufacturing industries that drive our economy. And the fact that they sacrificed, and then now the CEOs and all the corporate executives are making all this money, and the people who are actually doing the physical labor, they're actually doing the work, aren't making as much. It's only fair to see that imbalance shift, not even shift fully. So that way it's like, the CEO makes nothing, but find ways to provide more funding to the actual people doing the actual work.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's
Mm.
what the unions are there, is to be a counterbalance to the shareholders and the executives. So the UAW is also advocating for the COLA, the cost of living adjustments,
Yep.
so that they can get regular raises to keep up with the cost of
course,
living.
yeah.
That's something that they're advocating for. And coming out in this debate has also been, like you said, the discrepancy between CEO pay and the average worker pay. That gap has been widening in both the auto industry and all industries across the United States since the 70s.
Yeah, and that's not to say
Since
that
Reagan.
CEOs don't pay decent salaries and all that type of stuff, but again, so do your workers. And as long as that's a fair discrepancy in which your workers are making more when you make more. That's where I see it would be fair if the CEO is making 300 times more than the worker. If the worker is making $20 to $30 an hour, that's fine by me.
So basically it was broken down that the CEO of GM makes more in one day than any of the people who are on strike.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty.
So she makes $115,000+ a day. And yeah, that's more than anybody who's on strike. So this is what we're really talking about. So the CEOs are getting millions and millions and millions. And are they really providing that level of value? Very questionable in some circumstances. And then there's stock buybacks. That's the other big push, not necessarily with the unions, but with people who are looking at fair labor practices, because and this is why you do need unions. You do need organized labor to kind of counterbalance the CEO and the C-suite and the board, is because the board is looking out for shares. And if that means exploiting labor, they will absolutely do that. 100%. In stock buybacks, if you're not really familiar with them, what they are is when there is a certain level of profit, they basically just give them back to their shareholders rather than reinvesting it back in the company. So the shareholders get a windfall. And so this whole concept, there's like a trickle down of any way, shape, or form, actually never works because of the existence of stock buybacks.
Yeah, no. So again, it goes back to, and especially with Republicans talk about, that's the point of, cutting taxes for corporations and cutting taxes for these rich individuals, is so that way it does trickle down. And as you're saying, it isn't. So again, that's where, we have to start supporting labor there, especially over corporations, and especially if we're going to be giving these corporations tax breaks. So if we're going to be giving you tax breaks and you're not allowing that to trickle down to your workers, then why are we giving you tax breaks? I actually would support corporate tax breaks linked directly to job creation and to worker pay. I mean, that makes the most sense, because if we're talking about, we need to, with the concept of trickle down, I think the real issue with trickle down is it doesn't always trickle down. We need to force it to trickle down. That's the problem, is it needs to be.
It was never designed. That was rhetoric, and it was always supposed to be a money grab at the top. It has been very successful at that. The Gini coefficient in the United States has been moving us towards higher levels of discrepancy between top and bottom. That is why we have a very small group of people in the United States who own 99% of the wealth. This has been something people have been talking about. Actually, the concept of the 99% versus the 1% sprung both the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party movement, because it was something that even though different political spectrum, people thought was really unfair in the system.
And even to this day, a lot of Tea Party and MAGA Republicans have a real big issue with corporate elites and the amount of power they have in our lives, which they do. But that is a very common theme with populist movements. So again, if we're gonna be going over here with cutting your corporate taxes, that taxes needs to be going. Those tax cuts actually need to be going to reinvesting in your workers or into something similar to something like that. But
great.
Yeah, but again, that's something that we kind of brushed into it at the tail end of our thing because of our previous episode, because I mentioned it, and I still believe this, that the labor unions are such an important part of free market economics, because what a labor union does is it allows the worker to be equal to the corporation. Mm-hmm. And that's where we need to start seeing it as, and that equalization allows for a better free market equilibrium, because, between labor and business. So I'm a big supporter of labor unions, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can do to promote pro-worker Republican conservative policies, but it is
Looking for any pro-worker
Yeah.
policies on the Republican side, but I think that would be great. We also, by the way, have other organizations that are currently striking. We have the SAG, and then the writers.
It's a hard one for me because I am also a screenwriter, and I'm actually going to be doing a film festival next week where I'm trying to find an agent. But I'm actually not a WGA member, but definitely support what they're trying to fight for, because if you want to be a writer, like I want to be a professional screenwriter, but in order to be a professional screenwriter, I need to make enough money to do it, and that's one of the things they're talking about is how writing has become a freelance position. And they can't, make a living off of being a writer. And
Sure.
you should expect if you're in a profession and good at a profession that you can make money off of it.
Sure, you should at least have enough to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And interestingly on that, that I have seen a video recently that was interesting. And to be fair, I haven't checked the numbers, but it does seem very similar. But that basically the video was asserting that we're experiencing what might be described as a silent depression right now, because the average incomes right now are less compared to the PPP, so it was like the equivalent dollar amount in 1930. So we are actually on average poorer than we were directly after the Great Depression.
I haven't heard anything. I've heard the term, but I didn't read too much into it. But that is an interesting thing to think about, but it certainly doesn't feel that way. I mean, if you think about like our comforts and our luxuries that even with poor people with people with low income, still get to have, compared to the 1930s, and even compared to the not even technologically advancements, even ignoring all of that. I mean, I don't see the I guess you could say the realistic similarities in everyday life.
Similarities were that our wages have flattened and stagnated, our food costs have skyrocketed, our gas costs have skyrocketed, and our housing costs have skyrocketed. And those are three of the major contributors to cost of living in general. So while the wages have stayed here, our costs of living are now here. And especially some of the most basic things like our housing costs have gone so high that they're taking a larger and larger proportion of of the money that we make.
That makes sense. Yeah, there is definitely more of a percentage of what we make out of our lives is basically going into stuff such as rent and housing costs. For most people, because I don't drive, I bike everywhere, so it's not for me, thankfully. But a lot of people have a lot of car payments and costs when it comes to gas and the food costs, obviously going up, like you said. All these inflationary issues,
And it's not just inflation of right now. This is like cumulative.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this isn't just Biden's inflation that happened now. This is over.
You mean the pandemic inflation from Trump? Actually, it was the global pandemic related inflation, and Trump's and Biden actually, his FEC helped to bring it down to reasonable rates, which really bugs the Republicans because they hate to see Democrats have a economic win. But however, most economic wins come at the hands of Democrats anyway.
Okay, I only let her say all of that because I took advantage of my brownie. Like, I'm gonna get all this. No,
But anyway,
look, actually, ironically, inflation tends to be more. If we're being realistic, inflation issues are much more complicated than one president or another. Let's be real about it. So we can call it Biden inflation all we want. At the end of the day, there are multiple factors when it comes to inflation. It's not just printing money either, as I think Milton Friedman would say. Where it's like, oh, we're just printing so much money, and that causes inflation.
That is not.
That is a part of it. It is a part of it.
That's quantitative easing, right? And that's one of the tools in the toolbook in terms of how to create, how to bolster your economy, right? But that was actually a stimulus, and that is what was done. We didn't do it during the most recent time, but we did it during the 2008 or 2009 recession.
And I am not a monetary policy expert, so I have no. I
know a lot about monetary policy.
I know very little.
And most people don't. That's why it's
I flunked economics
or taxes or something.
I flunked economics like 3 times. I was actually, and I kept going, and I kept going to the same professor because he was like an Austrian school professor, like very libertarian, and a very old guy. So he's like an old wizard libertarian, and I just loved taking him, and I just kept taking him. He was super hard. I kept failing.
Because that's actually bullshit. Evidence. The Chicago school.
Well, I wouldn't know.
Virginia school.
I wouldn't know. I kept failing economics.
I have a minor in economics, and
I do want to learn it. I do want to.
Listen, this is a challenge, and I think the thing for me is that, I've actually gravitated towards modern monetary theory recently, and that's because it actually fits into what I know and have known for 2 decades, teaching and researching in the space as well. And that is that the economy is what we believe it is. Yeah. And that's like the part that's so wild to me. It's this thing that we just created, and it's like it works if we believe it's going to work. Yeah.
It is kind of crazy to think about it like that,
like,
but you're not entirely right.
So all of these things that we talk about related to the economy is all about like, how do we get people to continue to believe that it's working? It is. It's consumer confidence, the price index, this is one of the reasons why there are so many economic shocks, is because if we think that something's going to happen, then investors start pulling out their cash, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
It's one of the reasons why we had to control so much of the stuff online in terms of some of the cyber stalking. One example that I use in my class is that in 2014, when the Associated Press was hacked on Twitter, somebody put out a fake tweet that said the president had been shot. And within minutes, not the stock market had lost something like $140 million in value.
And then it's made even worse with all these, retail investor ads. You can do it in a push of a button, and it's crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's because actually some of those trades are automated, actually. So anytime that they see something going on online, they automatically sell. There's a whole lot that they have to sell, and then that can cause a crash, basically. And that's what had happened with that. So, but it's a good example of just how connected and built on this belief system that we have.
Yeah.
And then the whole other component of it is that our currency is a fiat currency, and it's a public good and commodity, which is a little bit too wonky for here, but basically it's like we made this thing and we believe that it has value.
I mean, so basically you're admitting modern monetary policy is all about fantasy, because it basically
our economy is fantasy.
Which actually,
dollars are fantasy. These are tokens that we have created to participate in this game that we call the economy. It is a fantasy. It is a fantasy. It's that we believe that it works, and we give this thing a value, and we don't give this thing a value. I mean, look at Bitcoin. Look at how Bitcoin has started up, and then it drops and it goes up and down. It has value because people believe it has value.
Yeah, the NFTs too were the same thing. It was a subjective theory of value. So there's a plausibility. What I've always understood modern monetary theory as is that there's really no reason to you can just keep printing money ad infinitum.
No.
That's how I've always so
you should read The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton if you're interested in learning about modern monetary theory. But basically, it is that you can infuse dollars into the economy for certain means, but that at some point, if it's too much, that it will cause inflation. Okay. Inflation is the risk to the economy, but that basically our budget as a federal government, as a large entity, because we have a large, robust, well-respected economy, that we can invest in what we need to invest in. It blows up this whole idea of that's why it's called the deficit myth, because we don't need to be worried about that, because that doesn't ever come. There's no special magic day in the future when there's too much. There's no special magic day in the future.
16 trillion.
Right. There's no day when China's just going to pick up at the phone and be like, hey, we're going to cash all these out. As long as we maintain the robustness in our economy. So as long as we are producing, we have research and development, and we have strong economic contributors, right? That day will never come. Yeah. That's how it works.
But of course, then it's assuming that we're always going to be productive and doing all that type of stuff too, which is...
Well, I mean, it's based on that. Yeah. And as long as you believe that the U.S. economy is working, it will work. If you start believing otherwise, then the value goes up.
It's all about belief. It's all in our head. It's all in our head.
It's all in our collective heads. We all believe it works. We all believe in values, just like everybody who's invested.
We can't even agree if someone won an election. How are we supposed to agree if an economy?
Oh no, we agree. There's just a handful of people who have been led astray, and that will happen. Just like there are certain people that think that we need to focus on the deficit, and it's maybe misled, but it's not how the economy actually works.
Very interesting. I'll have to check out that book. It definitely sounds like an interesting theory, at least to read about.
It's just a description of how the economy actually works. It's not a theory. It's not like, hey, this may happen. It's this is what happens.
Okay. Well, speaking of deficits and budgets, I feel like we should probably transition to the fact that we're about to have another government shutdown again.
That Byron Donalds and his Freedom Caucus are ready to say, fuck it, and shut down the government if by September 30th. I don't even think they have ultimatums anymore.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is I haven't been hearing much about this until now. They were on
summer break.
Okay, they were on summer. That's why. Okay. But then again, so are they planning a continuing resolution, or are they just trying to?
McCarthy has proposed a continuing resolution. However, Matt Gaetz basically shot fired. No, we're not going to do that. Currently, what's happened is an appropriations bill has passed both the House and the Senate, and they are not the same because the Senate passed a version that was the agreement that had been originally reached earlier this year between the Republican camp and Biden, certain cuts in certain areas and whatever, certain levels. The House, Republican-led House, then passed another bill that had more cuts than had originally been agreed upon. So the two bills that have been passed are totally different bills. So even to get to a point where we have an appropriations bill that can go through both, it has to go through both of the chambers again. And they're just not agreeing because of this far right contingent that exists in the House. So that same group, and it is Byron Donalds, it is there's whatever, 10, 12 people in the Freedom Caucus, Amy Big,
he got kissed out.
Is Bobo still in?
Yeah, Bobo is still in. So it's saying something, by the way. When Marjorie Taylor Greene is the voice of reason in something, when Marjorie Taylor Greene is right against you, on the right side against you, the problem.
Yeah. So they and basically Matt Gaetz already came out and said he's gonna threaten the job of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker.
Well, he even said. Apparently, he cursed in a private meeting. He's like, if you're going to make the motion, make the fucking motion. And I'm with them on it. I'm like, if they're going to, put your money where your mouth is, if you're going to do it, and can do it, or don't. But look, the reality is you're dealing with a divided government. You're not going to get everything you want. From my understanding, if they were going based on the deal that was already made, I thought that was a pretty good deal. I think that was probably, if they can get more spending. Again, I haven't read the new other bill and what were the proposed spending cuts or anything like that. So I wouldn't be able to tell you, if there's anything I object to or don't object to between the two bills. But the point is that the reality is you're dealing with a divided government. You have a House that is Republican that can extract spending cut provisions, which I believe they did. You have a Senate that's 50-50 even and is essentially a centrist body who would agree to those cuts. And then you have Joe Biden, who obviously wants all these things, but is willing to compromise on those areas, but not give up on everything. And so that's where, you have to, thread the needle. And
they're not interested in doing
the Freedom Caucus is not interested in that because, again, this is what happens when you have some Republicans out there who think, we won, therefore we can ram everything we want in. No, that's not how that works. In our Republican form of government, we are always talking about whether or not we're a democracy or a republic. The point is, whatever we are, it's a representative government. And that government represents various groups of people and various factions, and you have to work within those.
Yep.
And they don't seem to understand that reality. And you have that.
I think they do. I think they don't care. I think they don't care. It's all about getting what they want, and that's the point. And I was really disappointed when I hear some of the congressional representatives saying things like, "Oh, the government will shut down and you'll not even know it." That's horseshit. And this is why the federal government is the largest single employer in the United States. If we shut down the government for any period of time, people are automatically furloughed. So we're talking about a significant portion of Americans who are suddenly without a job.
Yeah.
And on top of that, and who are not going to get paid, by the way.
And who are not going to get unemployment.
And they're not going to get unemployment. And then there's the people who have to work because they're essentials like military and things like that, who, by the way, do not get paid the entire time that they're working. So the longer this goes on, the more detrimental it is to everyday Americans. And by the way, though the government actually does do things like inspections and making sure our roads and bridges are taken care of. They process our Social Security. They process Medicare and Medicaid, right? They process, TSA, right? These are government employees. Our FAA, government employees. So keeping the airplanes in the sky safe. These are government employees. Port inspectors. These are government employees who are keeping, illicit trades from coming in through our ports. So it's so ridiculous to me to say, oh, the government doesn't do anything. You would never notice. The government does so many things and we don't notice because it works well.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I think, generally, you might not. I remember the last government shutdown, I didn't see so much of a difference in my day-to-day life. Yeah, that might be true for most people, but you're absolutely right. You have millions of workers. We're talking about, again, what's the importance of the American worker? You have millions of workers who will have no job and will not get paid. And if they may pass a furlough bill and give them back pay, but guess what? That's not to pay their rent, their bills, all their financial situations like that. That doesn't stop for them. And so they're going to have real problems there. And it really affects their lives. And then you have stuff like national parks, right? That are shut down during those situations. You have federal agencies that deal with anything from infrastructure that help our municipalities, funding for that type of stuff. So it does create an issue, and it's definitely not something that I don't think Kevin McCarthy wants or the president wants. No one outside of the Freedom Caucus really wants a government shutdown. And that's something that would normally have bipartisan agreement. But you see these.
We do have bipartisan agreement. We got a small contingent of extremist Republicans who want this to happen. And it's very, very disruptive. And if you look at the 2012 economy, or the 2012 shutdown as well, was very detrimental. It downgraded our credit. So it actually remember that whole belief in our economy? Guess what is one of the reflections of that? Our credit rating. That is a reflection of how much people believe in us and believe that we're going to pay our debts. And if we start defaulting on debts, guess what happens? People stop believing in us. So it's a really, really dangerous game to play for the long run of our economy. That, and you also see economic contraction. So every week that there is a government shutdown, you can expect a GDP contraction of 0.15%, right? So you're talking every week is going to overall affect the economy negatively. So there's a part of me that is also thinking that this is straight partisan politics, that if they can help to tank the economy under Biden, that it will bode well for a Republican candidate in 2024.
I was honestly thinking the same thing. Mentioned that it's like, if they do this and then their GDP goes lower, who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the president, Biden, and which is again very interesting conspiracy theory for sure. But it's a postulation. It's definitely and I actually wouldn't dispute it either. It definitely would be a very Machiavellian political maneuver for sure.
I would also say, though, by the way, that when you are the people who caused the shutdown, you are not politically paid, by the way. So the Republicans lost their ass in the election following the 2012 shutdown. And so they also lost the presidency. So it's, they lost
shutdowns.
So it's a very
shutdowns do not benefit people who start. You're
benefit anybody. That's why it's a flawed political strategy. If that's what it is, it's based on flawed information about this fiscal conservatism. This is AKA the deficit myth. And it is going to lose them an election anyway. So I guess I just don't understand it. I do know that it is being powered, and the Freedom Caucus itself is powered by very, very powerful, extremely fiscally conservative groups like Club for Growth. So that there's more than just these handful of political people involved. They're the ones that are doing it, but there are big external influencers around that.
I mean, yeah, that would make sense that they have a lot of funding from Club for Growth and other like super free market conservative groups. And again, even with the deficit myth, I am a big supporter of fiscal responsibility, as are you. We've talked about this many times. Look, and we've talked about this budget issue many times. I honestly still think, well, honestly, what I think we should do, because I was thinking about it the other day. Texas has a 2-year budget. Like they do their budgets every 2 years. I don't understand why we can't do something like that, like a 2-year budget as opposed to a once-a-year budget. Or what I'd really like to see, because we have like the NDAA, which is the defense budget, and I think the Farm Bill is kind of the same way for agriculture, if I'm not mistaken. Like have different appropriation budgets as opposed to one big budget,
Right.
and do it for 2-year budgets. Stagger when you do them, and then have the areas that aren't controversial you can get passed, and the areas that are in need of debate you have those debates on those issues. But that's what happens with a lot of these budget issues is either one, you get to the last minute and then the 11th hour like we're at now, and either we have to do a continuing resolution or come up with something that everyone hates, which is basically what's going to happen again this time too. We're going to get something that everyone hates because we waited till the 11th hour and not did anything. I guess that summer recess was super important, guys. You probably could have worked over the summer, but nope, you need to go on vacation.
They usually are trying to get stuff done, but this, I guess, was one of the complaints against McCarthy is that him and other leadership weren't reaching out to other members during the break to kind of whip them for the appropriation.
Yeah, exactly. Like work on this now as opposed to now we're in the 11th hour. But I think having those divided up will be great. And the other reason is again, you have these budget issues. I don't know if it was a continuing resolution or another thing but it was over disaster funding, which was tied to the funding for Ukraine. And that type of stuff happens all the time. We'll apply one funding to another. So if you vote no on it, you're against disaster relief, you're against helping these people. And it's a ridiculous thing. And both sides do it. Both sides like to tie one thing to another so that way they can keep. It is, and it's a disgusting political strategy, and that's why I think we're going to have more, a more divided appropriation process where we're focused on appropriating for each individual agency or department, or maybe not even each agency or department, but groups of funding for different things. If you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
One of the points of contention that folks have had, because basically it's like an omnibus is what they call it, the omnibus appropriations bill. There's like omnibus. So part of it is that you it's actually hard to get stuff through Congress, part of it, right? Especially through Congress and the Senate. And so if you pull it together, then everybody's got to come together and make this choice. And then they don't get to nitpick. It's like, I don't like them, so I'm not going to approve their budget. So if you put it all together, so there's a lot of different strategic reasons and frankly logistics reasons that it came in on that way. It's just that because it's really, really hard to come to agreement on this, and sometimes they will use things politically just to blockade something. So we cannot have the situation where the government just doesn't have funding or certain things don't have funding because somebody wants to make a political spectacle of it, right? I mean, we could literally have this type of thing every single time if we broke it up.
That's
kind of part of the problem.
You could have someone be like, I don't want funding for this, and then we have no funding for one of the departments. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So
and that could again be both sides too. You could see Democrats be like, I don't want this funding for defense or national security or border security. So they're going to hold up funding for that. So that is definitely
put together.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the other thing. I want to give our government some credit here too. Is that
as Democrats do.
Well, I mean, it's our whole process of how we work together. So we didn't have a formal budget process until the 70s.
Oh, really?
Anyway, so this is something that's we've done over the last few decades. But it was much more piecemeal before.
Yeah.
And then it got kind of to be such a big monumental task, and that we had a full process. So not saying that that's perfect, but these are things that we can create. Yeah. Actually, the Senate and the House both have the capacity to create these systems to work better. So
they do, and they should, and they're not. and that's why we're in this situation.
No,
It's just a very simple process. Just can do this earlier.
just pass this thing.
Just pass this thing. What time is it?
It's like another 10 minutes. We're good. Because my clock is all messed up because I had it unplugged. Oh, you wanted to talk about impeachment.
Oh yeah, we're finally doing the impeachment inquiry, and I feel like I have to talk about this as someone
that there's no evidence for. So this is gonna be fantastic.
I'll tell you. Look, here's the thing. I haven't brought this up on the show yet, is because I feel like what we have is a bunch of puzzle pieces with some of them missing. I feel like we have things that I do think need to be investigated. So I am supportive of this impeachment inquiry, and I hope it's fair, and I hope it's thorough, and I hope it's based on facts and not based on political motivations, which obviously there's political motivations. So I know I'm already off there. But here's the thing, and Ken Buck actually who's a big Tea Party conservative out of Colorado, for anyone who knows. Ken Buck is not like a rhino, but he put out an op-ed, I don't know in which newspaper, but he said it best where he's like, we've turned these impeachments political, whether it's Trump or with Biden. We shouldn't be just continuously doing these impeachments. And then the more I think about it, ever since Bill Clinton, every president has had some sort of political impeachment threat or impeachment brought upon him. There is Bush had people calling for his impeachment over Iraq. You had people calling for Obama's impeachment. It's become so frequent that it's diminished the power of the impeachment and the meaning of the impeachment. I am not saying impeach or don't impeach. I am saying I want more information as to what evidence there is, if there is any, against Joe Biden. It does seem there's a lot of evidence against the Biden family about some sort of network. You're, of course, disagreeing with me.
Because there were significant reports that were put out by the special investigation that were happening in Congress. And there's nothing. There's no evidence. What the DOJ just got Hunter Biden on a weapons charge. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Really,
I think, yes, one of our audience members brought it up. We're going to talk about Hunter Biden. And I'm like, do I really want to? I don't care about a weapons charge. I really don't.
Just take
agree.
Because people who had firsthand knowledge were saying that no, this was never related to any networks. I mean, it's really, and listen, here's what people are getting kind of like twisted and worked up about. Yes, it was influence peddling. This is what happens in Washington, D.C. This is something that happens. I don't like it. I think it sucks. I would love for it to stop. But it's not illegal. It's not illegal what was done, right? And I'm all for, we want to get laws that say no family members of people who are in power can lobby or can become foreign registered agents. I'm all for it. Let's do it. Because I think it's horseshit that we have this kind of loophole. But at this point in time, Hunter Biden is a moron and a junkie, and he couldn't have put together a deal to save his life. And Joe Biden had nothing to do with it. And that's very clear. This impeachment is ridiculous. It's a waste of time. Yeah. Kevin McCarthy basically just gave it to the far right wing of his party so they would shut up. It was a stupid political strategy on the part of McCarthy, right? They're like, great, we'll take the impeachment and we're going to threaten your job too. And so it's just, I think it's a waste of everybody's time chasing our tail. And for somebody that we know that has a significant amount of problems, right? Like you're not going to find anything new that hasn't already been found, because listen, Republicans have been trying to find this for years at this point. And we know that if there was something that we found, it would already have come up.
Yeah.
And so I just think that it's a big waste of time. That's where I'm at.
Anyway, we'll see what happens there. We'll report on the story more as it develops.
As it develops. But yeah, I think that's it. Unless you wanna roll out on Bobert's big date to
oh yes. I forgot my vape pen too. I was gonna bring that just to how dare she. But yeah, here's the thing. It wasn't political though. Let's political. Let's remember this. It was because she was
one comment that's been eating at.
Okay, yeah. Go. We have our other Sean here who owns Ollie.
Regardless of what happened in that venue, the first thing I saw was what she was wearing to that play. And I don't give a shit. That's perfectly fine. Wear what you want to wear. But if a Democrat came walking out of a public event dressed like that, every Republican in the world would lose their fucking mind about how we have such a lack of morals in this country.
Yeah. So Sean here is saying that because Bobert was wearing a very sexy and revealing dress, that he says that if it was a Democrat, that they would have gotten a lot of flack for having lack of morals.
How dare she flaunt her sexuality?
Playing like grab the titties in the musical.
Right. I mean, I don't even have to get to that.
Grab the wiener, grab the titties.
Yeah, if you're going to be inappropriate at a play, then don't be. I mean, I'm a theater kid. I've been in a play. Please don't be rude and don't try to grab people or like vape in front of us.
Yeah. I'm really trying hard not to slut shame and stuff like that too. Like just be like, hey, look. I will say though that it was very trashy kind of overall. And
I'll be honest, I have a massive crush on them.
I would love to see.
So I
just would love to see our elected officials like hold themselves to a standard worthy of the office.
That's perfect.
How about that?
Perfect wording.
But listen, Bobo, you want to go slut it up at home, get those titties out, whatever it takes. That's fine with me.
I'm gonna have to revisit that video. Figure out what you're.
Maybe not at like a show where kids are there. There we go. We'll take it out.
Well, maybe she's trying to like do some pedophile stuff as well. Why is she there with kids? With sexing it up with kids?
Well,
I'm kidding.
Let's just leave it at that.
Let's just leave it at that. We're over here making accusations about Lauren Boebert being a pedophile. Let's end it.
But let's store some decorum to the office. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us here today for a Democrat and Republican walk into a bar. I have been your host, Democrat Cindy Banyang.
And I've been your Republican, Sean Hartman.
Thanks so much for joining us. We would love to have you join us and help us on our journey with a subscription. Get this episode and all of our video episodes directly sent to your inbox for only $4.99 a month. You can check that out on our plans and pricing page at bigmouthmediafl.com. You can get our everything subscription for $19.99 and get all of our wonderful podcasts and articles sent directly to you. Thanks so much for joining us here. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.